The restaurant was the kind of place where the sound of quiet jazz mixed with the clinking of wine glasses. Dim lights reflected off polished marble tables, and the scent of roasted herbs floated through the air. It was a Friday night and the dining hall was full. People spoke softly, dressed in their finest, pretending not to notice who sat at the next table. At one of the corner tables near the tall window sat a man everyone seemed to recognize. He was the kind of person whose presence drew attention without effort. A millionaire known for his sharp suits, loud laughter, and the way he liked to be noticed. Tonight he was with 4 friends, other businessmen who carried the same air of confidence and money. They ordered expensive dishes, laughed too loud, and spoke as if the whole room was their audience. Serving that table was a young waitress named Clara. She had been working there for almost a year. Every night she carried trays heavier than they looked, smiled even when her feet ached, and tried not to let the exhaustion show. She was quiet, polite, and always careful with customers, especially the rich ones who sometimes thought a kind smile meant something more. That night, Clara was nervous around the group. They weren't rude exactly, but they made jokes that weren't kind either, small remarks that stung if you paid attention to them. She kept her voice calm, kept her hand steady, and hoped to get through the evening without trouble. When she approached with a bottle of red wine, her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from tiredness. She poured slowly, carefully, but one small drop rolled down the side of the glass and landed on the white tablecloth. The men noticed. Steady there," one of them said, chuckling. "You're not nervous, are you?" Clara quickly grabbed a napkin and dabbed the spot. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said softly. The millionaire looked up at her, smirking. "You look too young to be working this hard. What did you dream of doing before this job?" She paused, unsure if it was a real question or just another way to tease her. Still, she answered honestly. "I used to play piano," she said, her voice small but sincere. "I wanted to study music." That caught his attention. "Piano, huh?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "That's quite something. So what happened? Couldn't make it?" Clara forced a faint smile. "Life got in the way, I suppose." His friends laughed lightly as if the idea of a waitress having a dream was amusing. The millionaire twirled the stem of his wineglass between his fingers and said, "Well, they say talent never fades. You still play?" "Not anymore," she replied. "Why not?" "Lost the touch." His tone was half teasing, half challenging. Clara looked down. "I just don't have a piano anymore." The table went quiet for a second before one of the men said, "There's a piano right here in the corner. Maybe she could give us a show." Everyone turned toward the small grand piano placed near the stage where a soft playlist usually played from the speakers. It had been years since anyone touched it. The millionaire's grin widened. "Now that's an idea. How about it? You play us something. If you're as good as you say, I'll double your tip." "No, triple it." Clara froze. She didn't like attention. She especially didn't like being challenged in front of a crowd. She tried to laugh it off. "That's very kind, sir, but I'm working." "I don't think the manager would like that." The men laughed again, but there was a faint edge in her voice that made the millionaire pause. He waved his hand dismissively. "I'll talk to your manager. You just play one song. It'll be fun. You'll thank me later." "I'd rather not," Clara said gently, still polite but firm. The table went quiet again, and one of his friends whispered something under his breath. The millionaire smirked, leaning forward on the table. "Come on, don't be shy. We're all friends here. If you can really play, you've got nothing to be afraid of." Clara looked at the piano. She hadn't touched one in nearly 5 years. She could almost feel her fingertips itching just from seeing it. For a second, she thought about how it used to feel. The smooth keys under her hands, the quiet rhythm of her heart when she played alone. But then she remembered the rent due next week, the long shifts, and how badly she needed this job. She took a breath. "Please, sir," she said quietly. "I really can't. Maybe another time." The group exchanged glances, half amused, half impatient. The millionaire chuckled again, shaking his head. "Suit yourself. I was just trying to make your night interesting." He said it in a tone that sounded harmless, but the words carried something heavier, a small sting of mockery that didn't go unnoticed by the nearby tables. Clara forced a smile, nodded, and stepped away to check on her other customers, but whispers began spreading. A few diners nearby had heard the exchange. They turned to look at her, curious. The quiet buzz of the restaurant seemed to shift. People liked stories like this. Moments where someone ordinary got pushed into the spotlight. A few minutes later, Clara's manager approached her near the service counter. "Is it true they asked you to play?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yes, but I said no," the manager sighed. "They're important clients, Clara. If they ask again, maybe just one song. It could be good for us." Clara felt her stomach drop. "Sir, I really don't want to." "I understand," he said, lowering his voice, "but you know how it is. They're regulars. I can't afford to upset them." She looked toward the table again. The millionaire raised his glass toward her and smiled as if he already knew what the answer would be. It wasn't fair, she thought. She was being cornered, turned into a joke. But she also knew she needed this job. She'd already been warned twice about refusing customer requests. Taking a quiet breath, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. Her manager smiled awkwardly and patted her shoulder. "Thank you, Clara, just one song." "That's all." When she walked back toward the table, the millionaire looked pleased. "Ah, there she is. Decided to take me up on my offer?" She nodded faintly. "Just one song." The room was quieter now. People were already turning in their seats. Some diners put down their forks, curious to see what would happen. Clara felt her pulse in her throat as she walked to the piano. Her black work shoes clicked softly against the marble floor, echoing louder than they should have. She stopped beside the piano, staring at the keys. It looked perfect, untouched, almost too clean. She ran her fingers lightly across them, the cool surface bringing back memories she had buried long ago. When she was a child, her mother used to say the piano could speak if you listened closely enough. Every note had a feeling. Back then, Clara used to dream of becoming a concert pianist. But dreams cost money, and money was something her family never had much of. When her mother passed away, the lessons stopped. Life became about bills and survival. The millionaire's voice cut through her thoughts. "Don't keep us waiting," he said with a grin. A few people laughed. Someone even pulled out their phone to record. Clara took another breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat down. She wasn't sure what she was more afraid of, failing or being mocked again. Her heart beat faster as she placed her fingers on the keys, but she didn't play yet. She just sat there for a moment, eyes closed, trying to remember what it felt like to be confident, to feel the music rather than the fear. In that silence, the whole restaurant seemed to be waiting. Even the servers stopped moving. The soft jazz from the speakers had stopped too, and for the first time that night, all eyes were on her. The millionaire leaned back, smiling in amusement. His friends whispered to each other, ready to laugh if she played wrong or hit the wrong key. But Clara didn't care about them anymore. In her mind, she wasn't a waitress. She was the girl who used to sit at her mother's old upright piano, playing until her fingers hurt, dreaming about stages and audiences who listened with their hearts. She whispered softly under her breath, words only she could hear. "For you, Mom." Her fingers pressed the first key, and that was the moment the room went completely still. When Clara pressed the first key, the sound was soft, almost uncertain, like a whisper testing the air. Then another note followed, and another, until a melody began to form, gentle, delicate, but full of something that words couldn't quite express. At first, nobody knew what to think. The millionaire leaned back, smiling, clearly amused. His friend smirked, waiting for a mistake. A few diners looked at each other, whispering, expecting her to fumble and laugh it off. But as the seconds passed, something started to change. The tune wasn't clumsy at all. It was graceful, emotional, and alive. Her fingers moved smoothly, almost as if they remembered more than she did. The soft rhythm filled every corner of the restaurant, wrapping around the clatter of silverware, the sound of the kitchen, even the hum of conversations. Within a minute, everything else faded. You could hear a fork being set down, then the rustle of someone turning in their seat. People were watching her now, not because she was a waitress who had been dared, but because she was someone who was making them feel something they didn't expect to feel. The millionaire's smirk faded slowly. He hadn't thought she'd actually know how to play, let alone play like that. His friends exchanged glances, their earlier amusement replaced with quiet surprise. Clara's eyes were closed now. Her hands moved with a rhythm that came from somewhere deep inside her, somewhere that had been asleep for years. Every note carried a piece of her life, dreams that had been left behind, the struggle of working late nights, the weight of loneliness, and the quiet hope that never really left her heart. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. She wasn't thinking about the restaurant or the people staring. She wasn't thinking about her job or the bills or the exhaustion. All she could feel was the music, her mother's lessons echoing in her memory, her small fingers on an old piano, the smell of afternoon rain, the sound of laughter in the next room. The song built slowly, like a story unfolding. Some people leaned forward, eyes wide, not wanting to miss a single movement of her hands. The waiters near the counter stopped serving for a moment, standing quietly to listen. Even the chef poked his head out from the kitchen door. It was as if the entire place had forgotten what it was doing. The melody rose higher, and suddenly the air in the restaurant felt different, lighter, softer. People who had come just to eat dinner now found themselves staring, lost in emotion. One woman at a nearby table wiped her eyes without even realizing it. The millionaire felt a strange tightness in his chest. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been moved by something that wasn't money or success. He tried to act casual, but his expression betrayed him. The woman in front of him, who he had thought was just another server, had managed to silence a room full of people who thought they'd seen everything. Clara didn't notice him. Her whole body moved gently with the rhythm, her breathing steady and her eyes still closed. The song seemed to hold her completely. Then, after a few minutes, she reached the final part. The music softened again, returning to the same quiet tone it began with. It was like the sound of someone telling a story and whispering the last words with love. The final note lingered in the air, clear, beautiful, and still. And then there was silence. Nobody spoke. Not even the millionaire. For a long moment, all that could be heard was the faint hum of the air conditioner and the beating of hearts that had just been touched by something pure. Then came a sound. A single clap. Then another. Then a wave of applause filled the restaurant. People stood cheering, smiling, even laughing in amazement. The noise was overwhelming, but not in a bad way. It was joy. Clara opened her eyes, startled. She hadn't expected applause. She hadn't expected anything. Her face turned red and she quickly stood, bowing slightly, unsure what to do. The millionaire and his friends were still sitting, speechless. One of them finally whispered, "She's incredible." The millionaire blinked, his confident smile gone completely. He finally stood and began clapping, slower but louder than everyone else. "Well," he said, his voice softer now, "I suppose that settles it." When Clara walked back toward their table, she could feel the stares of admiration around her. Some guests smiled warmly. Others gave her a nod of respect. She could feel her heart racing, not from fear this time, but from something new. She stopped near the table. "I hope that was all right," she said quietly. The millionaire shook his head slowly, still amazed. "All right?" he repeated. "That was beyond anything I expected." Clara smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir." He reached into his pocket, took out his wallet, and placed a large bill on the table. "You earned every bit of this, and more." But Clara shook her head. "That's kind, but I can't take it. It was just a song." He looked at her for a moment, unsure what to say. For the first time that evening, he felt small, like the money he had meant nothing compared to the grace she'd just shown. "You're too humble," he said quietly. She just smiled again. "I'm just doing my job, sir." As she walked away, one of his friends leaned toward him. "You really didn't expect that, did you?" The millionaire didn't answer at first. He was still staring at the piano. "No," he said finally, almost to himself. "I didn't." For the rest of the evening, the restaurant felt different. People kept talking about the waitress who played the piano. Some said she should be performing on a stage. Others wondered how someone so talented ended up serving tables. Even the manager looked proud, walking around with a small smile on his face as if her performance somehow reflected the beauty of the place itself. But for Clara, it wasn't about pride. After she finished her shift, she went to the back room to change. She sat down for a moment, taking off her apron, her hands still trembling from the rush of emotion. She stared at her fingers, the same ones that had once struggled to play scales as a little girl. She couldn't believe what had just happened. For years, she'd convinced herself that part of her life was gone, that dreams were a luxury only a few people could afford. But tonight, for a few precious minutes, she had lived that dream again. Not for fame, not for money, but for herself. Her coworker peeked through the doorway. "Hey," she said softly. "That was beautiful. You made the whole restaurant go quiet." Clara smiled, still a little dazed. "Thank you." "They're still talking about it out there," the coworker added. Even the boss looks like he's in a good mood. You should be proud, Clara laughed softly. I just played. That's all. But deep down she felt something stirring, a tiny spark that she hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, out in the dining room, the millionaire was unusually quiet. His friends had moved on to another topic, laughing about business again, but his mind was still on that piano. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just witnessed something rare, something money couldn't buy. As he signed the check, he wrote a note on the back of the receipt. When the waitress returned to collect it, he said, "Please give this to Clara." When she came back to clear the table, her manager handed her the note. It read, "If you ever want to play again, really play, call this number. I have a piano that shouldn't stay silent." She read it twice, unsure how to feel. Was it another offer, another dare, or something sincere? She folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket. Walking home that night, the city lights reflected on the wet pavement. She could still feel the echo of the keys in her fingertips. The sound of the applause replayed in her head. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't look like a straight road of long shifts and tired mornings. It looked uncertain but hopeful. Maybe, she thought. This was how second chances began, not with grand plans or perfect timing, but with a simple dare and the courage to say yes. As she disappeared down the quiet street, a soft smile spread across her face. She didn't know what would come next, but for tonight she had her music back, and that was enough. The next morning, Clara woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop. At first she thought it was her alarm refusing to turn off, but when she opened her eyes and reached for it, the screen was filled with notifications. Messages, calls, and unfamiliar names were flashing one after another. She blinked, confused. Then she saw the first message from a coworker. "Clara, you're all over social media. Everyone's talking about your piano performance last night." Her heart skipped a beat. "What?" she whispered to herself. She opened one of the links. It was a video of her at the restaurant, sitting at the piano, her fingers moving gracefully across the keys. Someone had recorded the entire performance and posted it online with the caption, "Waitress plays piano after being dared by Millionaire. You won't believe what happens next." The video had already been shared thousands of times. The comments were pouring in, people calling her incredible, inspiring, and unbelievably talented. Some said they cried watching her play. Others wanted to know who she was, what her story was, and where they could hear her again. Clara covered her mouth with her hand, not sure whether to laugh or cry. The same moment that had embarrassed her the night before was now making her famous overnight. By the time she reached the restaurant that day, the place was buzzing. Her manager met her at the door with a grin. "You have no idea what's happening, do you?" he said. She smiled nervously. "I saw the video." "Half the city saw it," he said. "We've had people calling since morning asking if you still work here. Some even want to make reservations just to see you play again." Clara didn't know what to say. It didn't feel real. She had never been noticed before, never been the center of attention. And now, suddenly, people were talking about her like she was someone important. As she walked through the dining area, a few guests recognized her and whispered to each other. One couple even asked if she'd play again that evening. She smiled shyly and told them she wasn't sure. In the corner, the millionaire was sitting at his usual table. He looked up when he saw her, raising his hand in greeting. For a moment she hesitated, wondering if she should go over. But curiosity pulled her in. "Good morning, sir," she said, keeping her voice polite. He smiled, less smug than before. "I was hoping you'd come in today. You've caused quite a storm." Clara tilted her head slightly. "I didn't mean to." "Maybe not," he said, "but you did something special. You reminded everyone that talent doesn't need an audience, it creates its own." She didn't know how to respond to that. There was something different in his tone this time. Less teasing, more thoughtful. "I left you a note yesterday," he continued. "Did you read it?" "Yes," she said softly. "I did. I meant every word," he said. "I have a grand piano in my home that no one touches. I'd like you to use it. You can come by any time. No strings attached." Clara frowned slightly. "That's very kind, sir, but I don't think that's appropriate." He smiled faintly. "You don't trust me." "That's good. You shouldn't, but I mean it. You have something rare, and if you don't use it, it'll fade." She looked down, unsure how to answer. "I'll think about it. That's all I ask," he said. She walked away, but his words stayed in her mind. The day went by quickly, with customers asking questions and her coworkers teasing her in good fun. When she got home that night, she turned on her old laptop and watched the video again. It didn't feel like her. The woman in the video looked calm, confident, and graceful. Everything she didn't feel most days. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from an unknown number. "Hello, Clara. My name is Henry. I manage artists for a small label in London. I saw your video. Would you be open to talking about a music opportunity?" She stared at the screen for a long moment. A music opportunity? The words felt unreal. She had given up that dream years ago, but now somehow it was knocking on her door again. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she opened a drawer near her bed and took out an old folded photograph. It was of her and her mother, sitting side by side at their small upright piano in their old apartment. Her mother's hands were guiding hers on the keys, both of them smiling. Clara touched the photo gently. "You always said music would find me again," she whispered. The next day, she decided to reply. She agreed to meet the man named Henry at a small cafe downtown. He turned out to be kind and genuine, with the sort of excitement people get when they've discovered something new. He told her how the video had reached not just local news but also a few international blogs. "You have a gift," he said. "People feel something when you play." "That's rare," Clara smiled nervously. "I don't know about all that. I just play what I feel." "That's exactly why it works," he said. "We can help you record a few pieces. You don't need to change who you are. Just be you." It was overwhelming. The idea of recording, of people listening to her beyond one restaurant night felt impossible, but beautiful. When she got back to work, she found a small envelope waiting for her in her locker. Inside was a handwritten note. "I hope you'll consider my offer. You deserve a piano that doesn't gather dust." She smiled a little. She still wasn't sure what to think of the millionaire, but there was something oddly sincere about him now. Maybe he wasn't mocking her anymore. Maybe he really wanted to help. That evening, after her shift, she decided to walk past the area where he lived. His house wasn't hard to find. It was a large white building behind tall iron gates. She didn't plan to go in. She just wanted to see it, to understand the kind of world that had challenged her that night. As she stood there, the gate suddenly opened. The millionaire stepped out, surprised to see her. "Clara?" he said. She froze. I was just walking by," he smiled gently. "That's quite a coincidence. Come in for a moment. Just a cup of tea." "I promise nothing strange," she hesitated. But curiosity again got the better of her. Inside, the house was quiet but warm. Large paintings hung on the walls and sunlight poured through tall windows. And there, in the center of the living room, stood the piano he had mentioned, a glossy black grand, spotless and waiting. Clara stopped in front of it, staring like it was a living thing. "It's beautiful," she said softly. He nodded. "It was my wife's. She passed a few years ago. She used to play every morning. After she was gone, I couldn't bear to hear it anymore." Clara looked at him, her heart softening. "I'm sorry," he nodded, his eyes distant. "That's why I meant what I said. It shouldn't stay silent. She would have wanted someone like you to play it." There was a long pause. Then Clara quietly sat down. She ran her fingers across the keys, pressing one softly. The sound filled the room, a simple note, but it felt like something inside both of them had come back to life. She began to play. Just a small piece, nothing planned, just what her heart felt in that moment. The notes echoed through the house like memories being washed clean. When she stopped, the millionaire's eyes were moist. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You have no idea how much that meant." Clara smiled. "Maybe we both needed it." He nodded, and for the first time, there was no barrier between them, no wealth, no pride. Just two people connected by the same language of music and loss. That night, as she walked home, she felt lighter. The city lights looked brighter, the air cooler, the world somehow kinder. Things were changing. The video had opened doors she never expected. The millionaire had turned from a stranger into something like a friend, and deep inside, a dream that once felt dead was slowly breathing again. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. Music had found her again. And this time, she wasn't going to let it go. The next few days felt like a blur for Clara. Between her shifts at the restaurant, the messages from people online, and the quiet moments she spent thinking about the piano at the millionaire's house, her life no longer felt ordinary. Everything that used to feel predictable suddenly seemed full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine. One morning she met with Henry again, the man who had contacted her about recording music. They sat in the same cafe, sunlight streaming through the window. He had a laptop open with notes and ideas written all over the screen. "I spoke to a few people," he told her with a spark of excitement in his voice. "There's a small studio willing to record your first song for free. They saw the video and want to be part of your story. All you have to do is say yes." Clara stirred her coffee slowly. "I don't even know what I'd play," she admitted. "I don't have any new pieces," Henry smiled. "Then write one. Don't overthink it. Just play what you feel the same way you did that night." She nodded, but deep down she was nervous. She hadn't written music in years. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It was more like finding her voice again after forgetting how to speak. That evening, she stopped by the Millionaire's house again. He had invited her to use the piano anytime she wanted, and after a long day, she found herself craving that peace, the kind only music could give her. When she arrived, he was sitting in the garden reading. "You came," he said, smiling. "I was hoping you would." "I hope I'm not bothering you," she said. "Not at all," he replied. "The house feels alive when someone's playing." She sat down at the piano, her fingers brushing the keys gently. The instrument gleamed under the soft light, waiting patiently. She played quietly at first, just a few random notes, trying to find something that sounded right. The sound filled the room with warmth. The millionaire listened from a distance, not saying a word. He didn't interrupt or try to advise her. He simply watched, his eyes soft, as if the music itself was enough. After a while, Clara stopped and sighed. "It's harder than I thought," she said. He smiled gently. "Good things usually are." She laughed softly. "I used to think I'd make music for a living. Now it feels like I'm learning to walk again." "You haven't forgotten," he said. "You're just remembering." His words stayed with her long after she left that night. She walked home with the sound of the piano still ringing in her ears, her mind spinning with unfinished melodies. The next morning she woke early and began writing. She didn't have fancy equipment, just a notebook and an old pencil. She scribbled notes, crossed them out, hummed tunes under her breath, and played a few parts on a small keyboard app on her phone. Hours passed without her realizing it. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. Days turned into weeks. Clara would work her usual shifts, then spend her evenings at the millionaire's house playing late into the night. Sometimes he listened quietly. Other times he'd pour tea and tell stories about his late wife and how she used to play that very piano. She said the piano spoke the truth, he told her once, smiling at the memory. "If you're honest, it'll give you back what you put into it." Clara loved those moments. They weren't about fame or money. They were about connection. Two people who had lost something finding comfort in the same music. One night, after finishing a melody she had been struggling with, she looked up and found him clapping softly. "That," he said, "is the one. The song you've been searching for." She smiled, feeling a rush of warmth. "You think so?" "I know so," he said. "It has feeling. It's real." Encouraged by his words, Clara met Henry again a few days later. They went to the small recording studio he had mentioned, a cozy room filled with instruments and friendly faces. The sound engineer, a kind woman with silver hair, greeted her with a smile. "I saw your video," she said. "That performance was magic. Let's see if we can capture a bit of that again." Clara sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and began to play the song she had written. The notes flowed naturally, every sound echoing the emotions she had been carrying all her life. Hope, grief, joy, and quiet courage. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment before everyone began to clap. "That was perfect," the engineer said. "One take." "You've got something special, dear." Clara smiled shyly. "Thank you." Henry looked like a proud older brother. "You did it," he said. "This is just the beginning." When the recording was released online, the response was unbelievable. The song went viral within days. People wrote comments about how it made them cry, how it reminded them of lost loved ones, or how it gave them peace. Some called it the sound of healing. For the first time in her life, Clara felt seen, not as a waitress, not as someone struggling to survive, but as an artist. The millionaire watched everything unfold from afar, smiling each time her name appeared in an article or an interview. One afternoon, he invited her over again. "I heard your song," he said proudly. "It's beautiful. You've made something that will outlive both of us." Clara laughed softly. You make it sound so serious. It is, he said. You took something painful and turned it into beauty. That's not small, Clara, that's everything. She looked at him for a long moment. You know, if you hadn't dared me that night, none of this would have happened. He chuckled. Then I suppose I should take a little credit. They both laughed, but deep inside she knew what he meant. Sometimes life's cruelest moments open doors we never thought existed. As the weeks passed, invitations started coming in. Small concerts, charity events, and even television interviews. Each one terrified her a little, but she accepted them all. She wasn't doing it for fame. She was doing it for her mother, for herself, and for everyone who had ever given up too soon. At her first small concert, held in a quiet hall filled with candles, she walked on stage in a simple dress. The audience was silent as she sat at the piano. Her heart pounded, but when she looked up, she saw the millionaire sitting in the front row, smiling encouragingly. That gave her strength. She took a deep breath and began to play. The music flowed from her fingers effortlessly, filling the hall with warmth. People listened in awe, some closing their eyes, some holding hands. By the time she finished, the crowd was on its feet. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the room. Clara stood and bowed, tears in her eyes. She looked at the millionaire again. He was clapping the hardest, his face glowing with pride. After the concert, she found him waiting backstage. You did it, he said quietly. You've made your dream real. Clara smiled, her eyes shimmering. You helped me believe I could. He shook his head. No, I just reminded you. The rest was all you. That night, when she went home, she sat by her window staring at the stars. Everything had changed. Her life, her confidence, her sense of purpose. But more than that, she felt whole again. The girl who once poured coffee and cleaned tables had become someone who made people feel through music. The waitress who had been laughed at by a group of rich men had turned that moment into her beginning. As she closed her eyes, the echo of her concert still in her mind, she whispered softly, "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for never letting the music die inside me." And somewhere in the distance, as the night grew still, it felt as if the world itself was listening. The days after her first small concert were unlike anything Clara had ever experienced. The restaurant where she worked felt almost empty when compared to the messages, calls, and invitations she received daily. People wanted interviews, private performances, and recordings. Some even wanted her to travel to other cities. It was overwhelming and yet exciting. Clara tried to keep her life normal. She showed up for her shifts, poured coffee, took orders, and smiled politely. But inside, her mind was elsewhere. Always on the piano, always on her music. Some customers recognized her and whispered excitedly when she walked by. Others asked for her autograph or a photo. She tried to remain calm, but she could feel the weight of attention pressing down on her. One afternoon, she received a call from a producer she had never met. He wanted to meet her immediately to discuss a recording contract. The offer sounded impressive, with promises of studio time, marketing, and performance opportunities. She felt a thrill she hadn't felt in years, but also a deep fear. What if I'm not ready? She whispered to herself. She thought about the first time she played the piano that night at the restaurant. The fear then had been intense, but once she started playing, it disappeared. She realized it was always the same. Fear before the music, courage during it. She decided to meet the producer. The office was sleek, modern, filled with people moving quickly between desks. He greeted her warmly and played some of the recordings she had sent him. "This is incredible," he said. "You have raw talent and people are responding to it. We can make something great together." Clara nodded slowly. "Thank you. I just want to be honest in my music." "Honesty is what makes you stand out," he replied. "Don't lose that." On her way home, Clara felt both excitement and anxiety. Her world was expanding, but she wasn't sure she wanted it to move so fast. She had just begun to find her confidence, and suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of her. That evening, she stopped by the millionaire's house again. She had learned that seeing him and hearing him listen helped ground her when life became too overwhelming. "You look tired," he said as she entered. "I am," she admitted. "Everything is moving so fast. I don't even know where to start." He nodded slowly. "I know it's a lot, but remember, the music is yours. Don't let the noise of other people take it from you." Clara smiled faintly. "It's hard not to feel like I have to perform for everyone all the time. That's why you need to take moments like this," he said, gesturing to the piano. "Moments where it's just you and the music. No expectations, no crowds, no contracts, just playing. She sat down, letting her fingers brush the keys lightly. The sound was familiar and comforting, like coming home after a long journey. She closed her eyes and let herself play whatever came naturally. She didn't think about perfection, about recordings, or about fame. She simply played. The millionaire listened quietly, sipping his tea. He didn't interrupt. He didn't praise. He just let her be. And in that space, Clara realized that music was more than performance, it was freedom. As the weeks went on, she began recording professionally. The sessions were long and exhausting, but they were also thrilling. She met musicians, sound engineers, and producers who respected her honesty and talent. Some nights she stayed late at the studio, working on a single melody until it felt right. Her body ached, her fingers blistered, but every note reminded her why she had kept going all those years. Yet fame brought pressure. Not everyone who watched her appreciated the work behind the scenes. Some people judged her for being quiet, for staying humble, or for declining invitations they thought she should accept. Social media could be harsh. One day, she read a comment criticizing her for not taking opportunities fast enough. Another called her arrogant because she hadn't responded to a fan request. Clara felt a heavy weight in her chest. It was confusing. She had worked hard to pursue her dream, yet some people didn't seem to understand that it was her dream, not theirs. The millionaire noticed her worry one evening when she came over after a long day. "You're carrying too much," he said gently. "You don't need to please everyone. You only need to please yourself and the music." Clara sighed. "I know, but it's hard not to let it get to me. Everyone expects so much." "Expectations are heavy," he admitted. "The people who matter will understand your pace. Others, they'll fade away." She nodded slowly. His words reminded her why she had always been drawn to music. It was personal. It wasn't about approval. It was about expression. The next challenge came unexpectedly. She was invited to play at a charity event with a large audience. It would be her first big public performance since the restaurant incident. Excitement and nerves mixed inside her, creating a tight knot in her stomach. On the day of the event, she arrived early, alone, to practice. The piano was massive and unfamiliar. She touched the keys lightly, testing the sound. Her heart raced. She hadn't performed like this in front of hundreds of people. The millionaire appeared quietly in the back of the hall. "Remember what we've practiced," he whispered. "Focus on the music, not the crowd." Clara nodded. She felt his presence like a quiet shield, protecting her from the weight of expectation. When she walked on stage, the lights were bright and blinding. The audience was enormous. People whispered, cameras flashed, and she could hear murmurs of curiosity. But she took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play. The music carried her through. Every note was precise, gentle, and alive with emotion. The audience leaned in, captivated, and for the first time, Clara realized that performing wasn't just about showing skill. It was about sharing a part of herself with everyone listening. By the time she finished, the audience was on its feet. Applause thundered through the hall. Clara stood, shaking slightly, tears in her eyes. She looked toward the back, and the millionaire was clapping, his face filled with pride. Afterward, people came to congratulate her. Some wanted selfies, others wanted autographs. She smiled politely, answering questions, but inside she felt a quiet calm. She had done it on her own terms. In the weeks that followed, Clara's life became a careful balance between work, recording sessions, and live performances. She learned to manage her time, to protect her mental space, and to hold on to the joy that music gave her. Through it all, the millionaire remained a steady presence. He never pushed, never interfered, and never demanded anything from her. He simply offered guidance, encouragement, and the occasional cup of tea when she needed a moment of peace. One evening, as she played quietly in his house, he spoke. "Do you know why I wanted you to play that first night at the restaurant?" Clara looked up, curious. "Why?" He smiled softly. "Because I saw something in you. Most people don't notice the quiet ones, the ones who work and dream in silence. But I did, and I knew you had a fire that needed to be seen." Clara felt a lump in her throat. "I never expected any of this," she admitted. "None of us do," he said. "But sometimes a small push, a tiny dare can change everything." She nodded slowly. "I guess I understand that now." That night, as she walked home, she realized how far she had come. She had started as a quiet waitress, nervous and unsure, serving tables in a crowded restaurant. Now she was a musician with her own path, a growing audience, and a new confidence she had never known. Yet, she knew her journey wasn't over. There would be challenges, doubts, and moments when the world would try to pull her back. But she also knew something else. She had the courage to face them one note at a time. Music had saved her not just from a quiet life, but from forgetting herself. And now, she would carry it forward, no matter what came next. As the city lights reflected on the wet streets, Clara felt a sense of peace. For the first time in years, she felt in control of her destiny. The applause, the recognition, the invitations, they were all wonderful. But the true reward, she realized, was the music itself. And somewhere in the quiet of her room that night, she whispered softly, "I'm ready for whatever comes next." The morning sun shone through Clara's window, spilling light across her small apartment. She sat quietly on the edge of her bed, holding her notebook filled with music sheets and notes. Her fingers traced the pencil markings she had spent months perfecting. Today was the day of her biggest performance yet, a charity concert in a large theater with hundreds of people expected. Her heart pounded with nervous energy, but there was also a steady excitement beneath it, a quiet certainty that this was the culmination of all her hard work. She took a deep breath, recalling the journey that had brought her here. From the restaurant where a simple dare had changed everything, to viral videos, small concerts, recording sessions, and private practices at the Millionaire's house, every step had taught her something about herself. She had learned to balance fear with courage, patience with ambition, and humility with confidence. By the time she arrived at the theater, the atmosphere was electric. People were filing in, taking their seats, chatting in low voices, and scanning programs. The sound of tuning instruments and soft chatter filled the air. Clara walked backstage, her hands shaking slightly but her head held high. She knew the audience expected a performance, they were expecting talent. But more than that, she wanted them to feel something, the way she always felt when she played. The millionaire was already there, seated in a quiet corner of the theater. He smiled when he saw her. "You're ready," he said simply. "I hope so," she replied, forcing a small laugh. He shook his head gently. "You don't have to hope. You've done the work. You just need to play." Clara nodded, taking a moment to center herself. She walked to the piano on stage, its black surface gleaming under the bright lights. The hall seemed enormous, and the weight of expectation pressed down on her like a tangible presence. Yet as she sat down and placed her fingers on the keys, she felt a wave of calm wash over her. She closed her eyes and thought back to that first night at the restaurant. She remembered the fear, the pressure, the mocking glance of the millionaire and his friends. And then she remembered how the music had carried her, how it had silenced a whole room and left people in awe. That memory gave her strength. The conductor nodded and she began to play. The first notes were gentle, almost hesitant, but with each passing moment her confidence grew. The music flowed naturally, every note carrying a story. It was a story of struggle, perseverance, hope, and quiet triumph. She didn't think about the audience or the cameras or the reviews. She thought only of the melody, of the way the piano keys responded to her fingers, and of the emotion she wanted to share. The audience was spellbound. The room fell silent as if the music had created a protective bubble around them. Every note, every pause, every swell of the melody pulled people in. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, gripping the edges of their seats, lost in the moment. The millionaire watched intently, but not with the arrogance of the first night. There was pride in his eyes, yes, but also quiet admiration. He had seen her grow from a timid waitress into a confident musician, and witnessing this transformation filled him with a sense of awe. As the piece built toward its climax, Clara felt tears welling in her eyes. Not out of fear, not out of nerves, but out of the sheer joy of creation. Every challenge she had faced, the long shifts, the moments of doubt, the social media pressures, the fear of failure, led to this very moment. She realized she was no longer just performing. She was living through the music. The final notes rang out, soft and lingering, filling the theater with an almost sacred silence. Then slowly applause began. At first a few hands clapped tentatively, but soon the entire hall erupted into cheers and applause. The sound was overwhelming, washing over Clara in waves of emotion. She rose from the piano, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face, and bowed deeply. The audience continued to cheer, some standing, some clapping, some wiping tears from their eyes. Clara's heart swelled. She had done it. She had shared her gift, her story, and her heart, and people had responded in kind. Backstage, the millionaire approached her, his face glowing with pride. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly. "You've touched every person in that hall tonight." Clara shook her head, still trying to catch her breath. "I just played," she said softly. "I couldn't have done it without everything that happened before." He nodded. "And that's what makes it real. You've earned this. Every note, every moment, every struggle, it all led here." In the days that followed, Clara's life changed in ways she had only dreamed of. The video of her theater performance went viral, receiving millions of views online. People wrote messages from all over the world, expressing how her music had inspired them, comforted them, or reminded them of lost loved ones. She received invitations to perform at more concerts, television shows, and charity events. Some even offered her a recording deal with professional labels, but Clara remained grounded. She continued working at the restaurant part-time, keeping a routine that reminded her of where she had started. She knew the fame and recognition were exciting, but she also understood the importance of staying true to herself. Music wasn't about applause or money, it was about connection, emotion, and authenticity. One afternoon, she received a call from a music school in another city, offering her a scholarship to study further and refine her technique. She was thrilled, but also nervous. Leaving home, leaving the familiar, was daunting. She called the millionaire to discuss it. "I want to do this," she said. "I want to learn more, but I'm scared." He smiled gently. "It's normal to be scared. Growth always comes with fear. But remember, you've faced fear before and turned it into music. You can do it again." She nodded. "Thank you for believing in me, for giving me a chance to play that first night. Without that, none of this would have happened." He shook his head. "I didn't give you anything. You did all of it yourself. I just reminded you that you could. The rest was all you." Clara smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She realized that while the millionaire had given her an opportunity, she had made it her own. Every late-night practice, every nervous performance, every tear, and every small triumph had been hers. When the day came for her to leave for the music school, the millionaire walked her to the car. "Go," he said simply. "Learn, grow, and never forget the music in your heart. No matter where you go, it will guide you." Clara hugged him tightly. "I'll never forget." The car drove away, and Clara looked out the window at the city she had grown up in, the streets she had walked countless times, and the restaurant where everything had begun. She smiled softly. Life had taken her on a journey she had never imagined, and she felt ready for whatever lay ahead. At the music school, Clara threw herself into her studies. Every day was filled with practice, theory, and new challenges. She met other musicians, some talented, some struggling, all passionate. The environment was intense but invigorating. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged in a world where music was life. Even as her skills improved, she stayed humble. She remembered her beginnings, the first daring moment at the restaurant, the nights of uncertainty, and the quiet support of the millionaire who had believed in her. Those memories kept her grounded, reminding her why she played in the first place. Months later, she returned home for a special concert at her old restaurant. The owner had invited her to play in the same place where she had first been dared to sit at the piano. The space was smaller now, but it felt familiar, comforting. As she walked to the piano, she noticed familiar faces, some of the diners from that first night, some of her co-workers, and of course the millionaire, sitting quietly in the corner with a proud smile. She took a deep breath and began to play. The music flowed effortlessly, each note carrying a story of perseverance, courage, and triumph. This time it wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about coming full circle, honoring the journey she had taken and sharing the love of music with those who had supported her from the beginning. By the end of the performance, the room was filled with applause, laughter, and tears. Clara looked out at the faces, feeling a sense of completeness. She had started as a quiet waitress, uncertain and overlooked, and now she was a musician who had touched the hearts of thousands. The millionaire approached her afterward, holding a small envelope. "For you," he said, "a little something to remind you where it all began." Inside was a handwritten note. "Your journey is proof that courage, talent, and heart can change everything. Keep playing and the world will always listen." Clara smiled, feeling a warmth she could not put into words. She realized that life had a way of turning simple moments, a dare, a challenge, a single note,